Hey, this is Tim Hanlon with Gizmag.com. Not too long ago, choosing an Android phone was pretty easy stuff. It came down to whether you wanted the HTC with the keyboard or the HTC without the keyboard. Of course, 2010's changed all that in a big way. Today I'm going to have a look at two of the latest Android phones, the HTC Desire and the Sony Ericsson Xperia X10, which depending on where you are in the world, have either just come out or are just about to come out. Both of these phones use the same 1 GHz Snapdragon processor. Now, I'd initially thought that would be ample to do anything you could think of with a smartphone, but the varying performance of these two phones has proved otherwise. I'm sure you've seen those ads on TV for a phone where everything is fluid and instant, even though the real world performance is far from it. Well, the HTC Desire is pretty much as close as I've used to that mythical ad phone, whereas the X10 has some serious performance issues. This probably shouldn't come as such a surprise given that HTC's had such a long time to polish their Sense UI over multiple devices, whereas Sony Ericsson's tried to do something pretty ambitious straight out of the gate with their user experience and probably bitten off more than they could chew in the process. HTC and Sony Ericsson both have their own social media integrations and applications, but I think they've both got a long way to go before you can run one of these phones without a dedicated Twitter client and Facebook application. About the only real use I've got out of them so far is the ability to link my contacts to their Facebook profiles and have their most recent picture come up when they're calling me. The X10 is certainly an eye-catching design, but once you're holding the device, it sort of loses a lot of the magic. Putting such impressive specifications in such a plasticky case was a really bad move, especially with the price tag that they've got attached to it. The HTC Desire is a bit of a departure from what we've seen from them in the past. That trademark chin is still there, but it's a lot more subtle than we've ever seen before. They've also replaced the physical trackball with an optical trackball, and while it's a lot better than it used to be, I'd still much rather use a touchscreen. Sometimes we forget that the most important thing about these devices is how they actually perform as a phone. The X10's got a couple of issues. For starters, the earpiece is a bit on the quiet side, and more importantly, there's some weird software issues where the phone simply forgets about missed calls and text messages. The Desire, on the other hand, is a wonderful phone to use. Of all the slab of glass style touchscreen phones that I've used, it's definitely the most comfortable to actually use as a phone thanks to the rounded top. The battery life on both these phones is really impressive. I ran one test where I had 3G enabled, Gmail syncing and Twidroid updating in the background, and both phones had about 40% left on the battery after 24 hours, so we're not quite at BlackBerry or Nokia levels of battery life, but it's a good step in the right direction for Android phones. Another point of difference in these phones comes from multi-touch. The HTC Desire ships with multi-touch enabled, with pinch zoom working in the browser and in Google Maps, which is a much better user experience than the multi-touchless X10. Interestingly enough, there's some conflicting information coming out of Sony Ericsson as to whether the X10 will receive multi-touch when it gets updated to Android 2.1 later this year. The X10 has such potential. It's the most gorgeous screen I've ever seen on a mobile phone. If they could just sort out the issues with the software and add some better format support like DivX and FLAC, this would be a really tough phone to beat in the media player stakes. But as it stands, it's a really hard phone to recommend. The first thing I did if I bought one would be to reflash it with a stock Android 2.1 ROM. The only thing I can fault with the HTC Desire is the AMOLED screen. Your live backgrounds and your home screens look amazing, but as soon as you're viewing photos or watching video, the shortcomings of the AMOLED technology become fairly apparent, especially when you've got it side by side with something like the X10. Having said that, it's the nicest Android phone I've ever used, so it's the clear winner of this shootout. If you want the more detailed review, just head over to gizmag.com. Cheers.